Good afternoon, Maine. Chuck Ellis here, and you are watching the Muddy Waters Podcast. The Muddy Water Podcast exists to help the people of Maine better understand what's going on in our state, because our mainstream media here, especially here in the state of Maine, but in general in our country, is not doing its job. It's not informing the people of what's actually going on, and it's trying to paint a narrative that really is eerily similar to what the Democrats are trying to claim. It's almost like they're the propaganda arm of the Democrat Party. So we exist to try and help people better understand what's going on. We do that not by me being a wizard like your Ben Shapiro's and your Charlie Kirks, who somehow seem to know everything. Instead, what I try to do is bring in different people from around the state in different roles who have some knowledge and expertise that can help us better understand what's happening, so that we can be more informed, and we can also share the truth of what's going on with those around us. One of the other things that you probably have noticed if you've been watching, or if you're watching right now, is look at this. I've got a new hat. We've got some branded stuff. If you want to support the podcast, there's a little QR code at the top right. You can go there, check out our store. We've got some nice merch. We've got mugs and other things there as well, t-shirts, sweatshirts. So please support the podcast and support getting the information out about what's really going on in our state, and engage in conversation, civil discourse. That's, creating the content is part of the story. The civil discourse and what you do with it is the part that really has the potential to help us change the narrative and win the information war here in our state. So thank you for watching. And we're going to now bring on today, the person that we have with us is State Senator Jim Libby, or James Libby, but I think we all call you Jim, right?
Yes, please.
Thanks for coming on, Jim, and thanks for, as I like to say to just about every Republican who's representing us in Augusta, and being that I'm here in Cumberland County, there aren't that many of us, but just thank you for going to Augusta, all the time, not every day, but most of those days that you go up there, and being in the minority, which I know it's not easy, and you basically go up there and it feels like it's a losing battle every single day, but you keep going. And I appreciate the fact that we do have people that are doing that for us. So thank you for what you do, and thank you for coming on the podcast.
Oh, you're welcome. Glad to be on here with you.
Yeah. Well, it's been a fun thing. As I kind of had said, I like to bring people on, and the beauty is that I learn along the way. Like, I'm a pretty smart guy that done a lot of research, but there's so much out there, and again, there's not a really great apparatus of information for people to be able to be effectively educated. And so, it's fun for me because I get to learn, I get to meet a lot of people, and then I get to learn along the way. So, since this is your first time on, I just wanted to start by giving people an opportunity to know a little bit about who you are, and what got you involved in Maine politics. Where are you from? What's your background? All that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm James Libby, and I am the senator for Senate District 22, which is also in Cumberland County. And you're right, there's not too many senators from Cumberland County. In fact, I'm the only one, other than I think Rick Bennett might have a town. I'm not sure. And Southern Maine doesn't have a lot of state senators either. We've got Matt Harrington and myself. So it really is there's something we have to work on. In terms of my background, so right now my profession is a college professor. I am a full-time college professor at Thomas College in Waterville, Maine. Probably other than government, certainly one of my favorite jobs that I've ever had. I've also worked full-time for St. Joseph's College, and I've worked part-time for Colby and for Husson. I started my career at GTE Sylvania. We made circuit breakers for automobiles. Then for a while I worked for Corning and Corning Glassworks, so that was a tremendous experience as well. Another one of my favorite jobs is at one of those Maine economy jobs in the outdoors in the summer. I ran hoop basketball camp in Casco, Maine for several years, actually.
Nice.
Both as the basketball director and then later as the operations director for that. That great hoop camp is located in Casco on Pleasant Lake, and it's just a beautiful lakefront spot. And gosh, they have been there for 50 years almost, and it's really it's a wonderful part of Maine. I have been I've done an awful lot of other jobs. I was a member of the legislature from 1992 to 2000. I did 2 terms in the House, 2 in the Senate. I've been on a lot of different committees, but the Education Committee probably is the one I've served on the most. I'm currently on the Education and Cultural Affairs Committee. I believe this is my 3rd different term on that committee. I've also served on taxation. We're going to talk a lot about taxes today, I understand. State and local, labor, you name it. I've been on the Maine Labor Relations Board. I've been a trustee for the community college system and for a variety of other programs, including the Jobs for Maine's Graduates Program, which I was a founding co-sponsor and a founding trustee. I love that program. So I've been around a long time. In 2002, I was just crazy enough to run for governor. I lost in a primary to a great guy named Peter Chinquette, and I understand he's moved back to Maine. I love Peter. And he lost to Governor Baldacci. So I spent from 2002 when I ran for governor through 2022 raising my kids. So I've got 2 children. One's in the public school setting, Bonnie Eagle High School. He's currently a junior. And my daughter is in the Kent School in Kent, Connecticut, which is a private boarding school. So I have good experience working K-12 as well. I used to have a Maine superintendent certification. I worked as a math teacher in the Sanford school districts. So, I know an awful lot about education. I'm very privileged to be up in Augusta, which is where I am now, trying to work on the behalf of the residents of Senate District 22.
Wow. It just feels like a huge mouthful, all the different things that you've been a part of and you've done in the past. Obviously, a wide variety of things from the private sector to the public sector. So obviously got a lot of experience and know from a lot of different angles, like what's going on in our state. So I think that's the type of person that you want representing you. I think so. I think that really helps. Yeah. So like the question for me, one of the questions is like, but why, like, what is it about, like, especially, I mean, there's like a second follow-up question to this, right? Like, but like, so what is it about politics in America today that makes you want to be like, why did you want to run for governor? Why do you want to be serving in the Senate? Like, what is your why, if that makes sense?
My why is Maine. I'm a lifelong resident of Maine. I have 4 college degrees, including a PhD, and I did spend 2 years out at St. Bonaventure University in Olean, New York, getting my MBA out there. But I came right back, and I've always loved this state. And we have everything. I mean, we've got the ocean, we've got beautiful lakes. I'm lucky enough to represent Sebago Lake, for example. Town of Sebago, Naples, Standish are all in my district. We have skiing. We have everything, and I love this state. A little bit cold in February for me, but everything else I love. And I don't ski anymore like I used to. So, but anyway, just all kidding aside, it's the state. I love to see our state thrive, and I hate to see times when the leadership is less than ideal. And every state goes through these ebbs and flows, but unfortunately, right now in Maine, there are just so many issues at the state level that are they're not just controversial; they're problematic, and there's a lot of data-driven kind of problems. You can identify them with data, but then you can also solve the problem with data. And I don't know if we've gotten to that second part yet, Chuck.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like your counterparts, the Democrats in Augusta, are really interested in solving problems, unless they're solving problems by creating bigger, worse future problems, right?
Yeah. Probably the biggest problem that we have now, and the reason that I'm in the state Senate and what I'm trying to work on, is that the fallacy of being a welfare state. I don't think people really understand just where that has taken us in Maine. And but there are a lot of people in Maine that follow this, so they're aware of the fact that 1 in 3 Mainers are on Maine Care, for example. That's something that is completely unsustainable. The numbers will tell you that. Maine Care and Medicaid is a really important program for those people in need. And how do you define people in need, though? That's really what we battle with here in Maine. And unfortunately, it's gotten to the point where some people believe that Maine Care is like single payer healthcare or something. We should just utilize the program to funnel some money into, and at the same time, we'll get reelected that way. So I really struggle with that whole concept. The same is true of general assistance. I represent 13 really rural towns, and I went to a couple of town meetings here recently, and I asked, like when I was in Cornish, well, what's your general assistance budget? And they said $2,000. And then I had to explain to them that Portland had received over $120 million over the last 6 years. So the disenfranchisement of rural Maine from the whole rest of the picture it's unbelievable. And because of that, we're eventually going to talk about the economy, but because we are we've become so much a part of the welfare state, we're chasing investment out as fast as we can chase it out, and we're not attracting a lot of new investment, and that is a significant problem. And honestly, up here today, I was serving on the Education and Cultural Affairs Committee, and everybody on that committee, Democrat and Republican, they all know there's no money for a program, even if it's a good one. We're putting billions into the welfare state, and that's not an exaggeration. That's literally what it is. And all you have to do is run the numbers. And so it's Chuck, from where I'm at. It's something that I've been willing to come back up here and put everything I've got into finding new leadership. At first, I thought, well, I can go make a difference myself. But now, I realize I'm going to need a lot more people who think like me, that really care about the economy and care about investment and care about bringing people to the state because they want to come, as opposed to people leaving the state because they can't retire here, they can't afford it here, they can't pay the sales tax, the income tax, the incredibly high property taxes. So all of that, Chuck, it takes that much in taxation to pay for the welfare state. It's an implosion when you go even further than what we've done, and I don't want an implosion to happen here. Neither do you.
No, absolutely. And I think we're like, even if we don't do any more, I think we may implode anyway. I mean, again, we had a little while back, we had Katrina Smith to kind of put some different numbers on exactly what you said, right? One in every 3 Mainers. So that's like 425,000 people in the state of Maine are on Maine's Maine Care system, as opposed to like similarly sized New Hampshire that has 180,000 people on their similar program. And so it's wildly different and worse. And I think the argument, there's a couple of things. I think the argument from the left or the Democrats is that, well, there's just that many people who are in need. And, I just think it's like, maybe we've attracted people in need because they know that they can come to Maine and take advantage of our programs. If that's what you mean, then maybe the answer is yes. But we shouldn't be focused on trying to attract poor people to come to our state. That's not good for our, our economy, our state. And I think Libby Town is commenting and saying, how many of those Mainers are quote unquote new? I put the quotes in there, but are like the new.
I've got a great story for you, Chuck.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, I was down in Georgia in an Uber, and the driver said, well, where are you from? I'm like, Maine. And he's like, oh yeah, I had a friend that moved up to Maine. And I said, well, yeah, that's great. What did he come up to do? And he said, well, the government's just friendly there. He was able to get a couple of years of benefits. That's what he said. So I mean, I didn't assume that that the person was a new Mainer per se, like, had achieved asylum or something like that. But we do that. Those are people that we do attract because we're so generous with welfare benefits and at the expense of the people that have lived here for generations.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So one of the things that I feel like is worth talking about in the world of economics, given that I have an economics professor, here with me, is kind of like talking about like the basic economic theory that I think we have in the conservative side versus like how the Democrats and the liberals tend to think, and then why are we right? I guess like because I feel like kind of going broad based is kind of helpful, and then we can talk about like some of these specific things about how these are areas where we're actually doing things that are doing long-term harm to our economy to fix short-term problems.
Well, yeah, I mean, and I talk about this everywhere I go. It takes a village. Has come to mean that government should take care of you. But the village that we're really talking about is the enabling of people to be able to raise families, establish a home, and build equity over time. And to the extent that policy is the driver of that, that's a fallacy as well. I mean, if we deregulated and we focused on that as much as we regulate, we'd probably have a lot more luck. And so, in this state, though, we're just not there right now. We have high regulation, incredibly high taxes, and we can start with the state income tax. The state income tax now, different than it was when I was younger, is a progressive tax. So the more that you make, the more that you pay. And I think a lot of the leadership has worked for years on the left by convincing people that those are the people that can afford it and they should pay. Actually, those are the people that will stimulate investment, and so will everybody else if we all, kind of have a different approach to It Takes a Village, where we're all empowering each other to become a part of the ownership society, right? And that should be the goal for young people. And right now, with Maine's incredible, I think, lackluster efforts in housing and thinking about, that first home that you buy, what an incredible difference that is from paying rent. If you're paying rent and you're a young person, I'm glad you have a roof over your head, because some people don't, but you're also, burning funds as fast as you can burn them. Whereas if you even start with a starter home, then you are starting to build your equity. And so the problem is that nationally, the last administration thought, oh, it's okay to spend as much as possible from on the government sector. Also expand the money supply. So not just borrow and spend on a fiscal policy, but expand the money supply as well. It's okay to do that. Well, guess what happens to interest rates when you start to do something like that? And the higher the interest rate goes, the higher your monthly payment for the home that you want to buy. So that's not explained enough to people. They think that a few people think that somehow interest rates can be reduced magically. The only way that they can be introduced is to take money out of the money supply. So the Fed can do that. The Fed has really taken an opposite approach, and I think they were doing a decent job a decade ago. I think they got caught up in COVID and thinking that they were more important than they really were. And they expanded the money supply from the M1 money supply, right? So currency and coin, basically checking accounts. They expanded that from around $6 trillion up to $22.5 trillion in the money supply. And it immediately caused, there's a lag, but it soon caused inflation. And in addition to that, again, I think due to COVID, the federal government began to borrow and spend at an unbelievable rate. And things like the PPP program, which our senator, Senator Collins, had a role to play. It pumped money in the system. It might have helped us in the short term, but in the long term, there's actually damage from that. And what happens is that, people were talking at the time about, there are shortages, there's supply chain disruptions. That's what's causing. No, that's part of what's causing a price problem in specific markets, perhaps. But if you've got prices going up across the board, that's 100% government created. 100% government created. And so I try to explain that. Of course, up here, we only have opportunities other than shows like yours to do quick sound bites, and it's really difficult to get that into the mainstream media. But it needs to be said, and that is that, if you want good economic policy, you have to have a stable currency. People have to be able to afford a home, and policy should be wrapped around that. Taxation policies, regulatory policy, money supply policy, they all should be wrapped around that theme. And so now I do think that our current president is trying to do some of that, and there will be short-term disruptions because of how difficult it is to bring our economy back to that state. It's a lot more difficult than people think.
Yeah, no, I think it's really challenging. I think that Trump is making some sizable, you could call them gambles unless you actually know the future. So I guess every major policy decision is essentially a gamble. It's based on data though, and I think that but he's making some big gambles, and I think that I believe, I'm hopeful anyway, that they will pay off. I do think in general, fixing our trade problems with a lot of these countries that are taking advantage of us is a good thing. I think the stuff that they're trying to do with Doge, reducing government spending, as you say, this is why things cost more. When the government spends, the money has to come from somewhere, and it comes from them borrowing, which it means it's increasing the money supply, and by increasing the money supply, you automatically cause inflation, cause things to cost more. Who gets hurt the most? The poor and the middle class. And it's the major corporations. That's where the money ends up going, and so their share of the wealth that exists increases, and the average person is hurt and hindered. And this is one of the things I've also seen with a lot of regulation, right? Regulation, I think there's a place for regulation, obviously. However, I think a lot of the regulation tends to favor major corporations because the smaller companies, smaller businesses can't handle that regulation, and so it puts them out of business, and a lot of them, and it makes it more difficult for them to be competitive with the bigger businesses, and so it ends up helping bigger businesses, which ultimately is bad for the middle class and the poorer people, because you have less job opportunities and less opportunities to kind of make wealth. One of the things that you said earlier that I love, and I think that needs to be said more, is that there's this anti business owner, I think, kind of idea. Our society is against people being successful business owners. We're we want to penalize people. They wouldn't use that, but they're well, they can afford it. But the idea is you're essentially penalizing somebody for being more successful. Whereas what we should be doing is encouraging more people to be successful. We should be praising people like this and saying, look, this is something that you can do. This is something that we want more people to do, right? Not let's take money from them because they've been successful. These other people haven't been successful, and let's go ahead and give money to them. When you look at monetary policy and all these things, there's always a cost to everything that you do. And one of the things that I find that the Democrats and socialists just ignore, I'll say capitalism has problems, right? Especially in today's world of what I would call crony capitalism. I didn't coin it, but that's what I use, where major corporations essentially influence regulatory decisions in ways that help them and hurt other people. And then people blame capitalism as being the one that's at fault. It's not capitalism itself. More pure capitalism would not allow this, but it's because they're negatively impacting capitalism. But capitalism works as a system because it takes into account human nature, right? Humans are greedy, right? We want more for ourselves, and if there's an opportunity to get it, we're willing to work hard for it. And so
Yeah.
some people could say that this is bad, but ultimately what that does is, because people are working harder so that they can help themselves, they're developing things and creating things that are creating other opportunities within the market and within the economy. Whereas
Yeah.
when you have a system like socialism, which seems like this is what the Democrats are pushing these days, socialism it ignores human nature, because human nature in a socialistic society, one of the reasons that it doesn't work is because people are also selfish. With both systems, people are selfish, but with one system it helps. In the other system, their selfishness says, well, look, why am I going to work hard if I'm not going to get any more for working hard, just so that I can help other people? Like, we can like think, unicorns and rainbows, but we know the truth. We know that there are going to be some people that will work hard because they have like high ethics, high moral character, but there'll be a lot more people that will take the easy path and say, like the guy who you were mentioning earlier, who kind of came to Maine because he knew that it was easy to get help from the government. You're going to have people who are opportunistic and take advantage of it, and ultimately weigh down the rest of society.
Yeah, if I was able to give that person advice, I would have said, well, go out there and stake your claim, because work gives you purpose. It gives you meaning in life, and there's great satisfaction in achieving something, innovation, especially, value added. It comes from the human mind. If you see some production process that doesn't seem to be as economically efficient as it should be, well, you can do something about that. You may have to observe the way the process is being carried out. It may be the machinery or the implements that could be improved, but we have that ability here in Maine, and we shouldn't be hampered by some of these ideas about, it's better to spread the wealth and rob from Peter to pay Paul and that sort of thing. But yeah, I when I was here in the 90s, Chuck, we had McKernan was the governor, and then the early part of Angus King's governorship. We had a really strong Department of Economic and Community Development up here, and the people that worked in that department, they were thinking, well, how can we provide seed money to the small business person in Maine? And we came up with programs that I was a part of, by the way, that allowed people to have a little bit of stimulus, but then a lot of skin in the game. So whether it was, we had a pine tree program, the TIF program was a really important one. I learned that firsthand when I was representing the town of Hollis, and I got a call from Poland Spring, but they were at the time were owned by Nestle, and so the Nestle executives said, "You're on a list with 4 other towns. We're looking at expanding. The Poland Spring plant is at capacity. There's nothing more we can do, and we're looking at expanding. And we would like to work with you on maybe expanding into Hollis." So we established for them, and I worked with Governor King on this, we established a TIF, tax increment financing, that would allow them to build some of the infrastructure around the plant, and also work on roads and bridges. And actually, there's still some of that going on. The entry, to the Maine Turnpike that you're seeing built down in Saco was actually like at the tail end of that whole plan. But anyway, they built this $100 million facility, and instead of people commuting into Portland from the town of Hollis, people were commuting from Portland to work in the town of Hollis, and that's a big business, I realized. But we were working with sole proprietorships, partnerships, and we were establishing new businesses all over the place. And especially, think of the restaurants. Maine is known for restaurants. Well, not anymore. We have taken a combination, Chuck, of the kind of the welfare state, but also we've pushed up the minimum wage so high that they call it supply shift up into the left. So what has happened is Some people have had to leave. They've had family businesses for 5 decades. Like I think of some of my favorite restaurants that have closed. I feel so badly about it. They couldn't find the labor. Well, you'd think if you're raising the minimum wage, you're going to find labor. No, because all these other prices that went up at the same time caused some people to leave the state, and others they became wealthy enough to leave the workforce. So our workforce participation rate has been incredibly low. It's been down in the 60% area until just recent months. So that's another thing, is that again, you're kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul when in the state of Maine you've got $16 and what is it, 75 cents now? I have 16.45, whatever it is, per hour. And over in New Hampshire, it's still $7.25. They're letting the market dictate what people should pay employees, and they're letting the employees decide, should I take this job or not? Well, because remember, the employee has a choice, right? So all of these, there are when you start to have regulatory policy and monetary policy like we have, you're right. The rational expectations theory says, I'm going to take care of me and my family. I'm going to do what I can. Well, you're starting to change the dynamics of that, and people start making other decisions like, well, I guess I should become I should be on Maine Care. Even though I'm single, I'm young, I'm healthy, and it would serve the state of Maine if I went out there and looked for private health insurance. And even maybe Maine could help coach those people to find that sort of opportunity. But instead, what we're trying to do at the state level, which is a mistake, is we're trying to crowd out insurance by having state-funded opportunities. Not just, I'm not just talking about Medicaid. I'm talking about other programs that we have that pay for part or even all of individuals' insurance. I don't think people really understood about 15 years ago what they were getting into when they started crowding out private insurance, and when less Maine employers were expected to provide that as a benefit for work. And what a mistake. And we can go back. It's just going to take a lot of work, Chuck.
Yeah. So tell me, I want to follow up on a couple of things. You said a lot there. So, with when you talk about like crowding out insurance, like how are we doing that? Like how are we crowding out these insurance companies?
Well, if 1 in 3 Mainers have the opportunity to get onto Maine Care, then they don't need. So you could work as a independent contractor, and that's always been a problem, right? If you're an independent contractor, it's hard to find insurance, and so we've made it easy to find insurance, and we'll subsidize it or even pay for the whole thing. And independent contractors, we were working on that problem, and we had narrowed that gap to where they could find insurance about 2 decades ago, a little bit less than that, and in the private sector. But now we've gone in the opposite direction, and unfortunately, I don't think this governor, she's a great lawyer. She is not an economist, and she doesn't have a lot of people working for her, although she just hired Mike Duguay in the Department of Economic and Community Development, and that person has worked in economic and community development for years with the city of Augusta. He's worked in higher ed. He's a bright guy, so I'm hoping for better things. But right now, what we have is driving businesses to close, and it's driving when obviously you go on COBRA, and then eventually you got to find health insurance if you're unemployed, and or if you're out of the labor pool, right? So there really is too much of that in Maine, and we're all going to have to lock arms and go in the other direction, row in the other direction.
Yeah, absolutely. And so like one of the things that I think is interesting that I want to follow up on too, is this TIF thing. I think a lot of people don't know
Yeah.
know a lot about these. And when they do hear about them, it's usually from the left, and it's usually people who are crying about the fact that you're giving tax breaks, as they want to call it, to wealthy corporations, right?
Yeah.
But like, I would like when you look at the whole TIF process, it's actually a way to what it ends up doing in the long run, in addition to creating jobs, right, is it increases tax revenue, right?
Yeah. 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 Well, the TIFs have a limit in terms of the number of years that they can be applied. So after that, the business is paying full property tax. So, I think what people benefit from is if, we used to have the roads that went from Hollis, for example, down to the Maine Turnpike, right? They were in pretty tough shape. So, route, I think it's 112, I can't remember, but that goes down there, really needed to be widened just for safety's sake, especially if we're going to have trucks on that route. And by the way, the company was willing to do a pipeline and quickly found that they weren't going to get a lot of help doing that. But I really do think that the TIF can also benefit the community. And sometimes there's money left over at the end of the TIF's life that the municipality still has, and there are ways to work with that money as well to lower the tax burden to the property taxpayer. So I like tax increment financing. It's not a perfect vehicle, but if it stimulates, like at Poland Spring, the 400 jobs, 400, and these are well-paying jobs. So, and they require trained personnel. In a lot of cases, these people have to have licenses. They have to have training, certifications, and they're great paying jobs, and you can afford to raise a family even in Maine. So we need to, and every business starts in somebody's, garage or basement. And that's what people don't understand is that, well, Poland Spring had the advantage of that spring, right? So we can take advantage of our natural resources too. But for a lot of businesses that start out, give the person a chance to be innovative, and they will. I'll just give you an example. This goes to an old story from Bangor area. The person used to be responsible for cutting sheet metal, and so they noticed after the cut that the edging will always be rough, right? So in order to make that, bring some innovation to the problem and make things better, the person actually used a high pressure water gun and added sand to make the cuts in the sheet metal. And when the cut was done, the sheet metal had a smooth edge. And that was a Maine invention. Mainers are inventive because they know that they have to be in order to live. And we don't want to take that innovation away from people. We want to equip them with it and help them with it. And we want to pass that down through generations. And that's honestly, that's not really happening as well as I would like to see.
Yeah, no, we definitely need, and I think that's where regulatory, like the way that we regulate our state, creates opportunity for people to be able to innovate, right?
Yeah.
So, and that's where, like, I love this idea. I'd never heard of TIFs until I was part of, I was like on the Wilton Downtown Committee years ago. I used to live up in the Wilton area, and they had enacted these TIFs, which is a big part of the reason I think the Comfort Inn chose, partly because Farmington didn't really want to work with them. And so the Comfort Inn feels like it's in Farmington if you're from the area, but it's actually technically over the line in Wilton. And they had this TIF, and just the idea that they're like, you do whatever improvements you want to do, but you won't have to pay the full tax. Well, you do actually have to pay the taxes. But then you get a rebate back from the town. That's kind of how theirs was structured. So it encourages business owners to invest, and they don't initially, basically, effectively, they don't have to pay all the taxes because they've improved the value of the property. And so now the tax evaluation goes up. But again, it gives them a little bit of relief initially to encourage them to do that. And again, it creates more in the long run. Once as you said, the TIF wears off, now all that new value is paying taxes and reducing the tax burden for the rest of the people in the town. plus it's creating jobs and different things like that. So I think there's a lot of value in using tactics like this to spur economic opportunity, which is something we desperately need in Maine. As you said, like one of my favorite restaurants that I always used to say, if there's 2 restaurants in Portland that you need to go to, I wasn't thinking DeMillo's, I should have been, but anyway, I was thinking
of Muddy, you ought to be thinking about the Muddy Rudder, because I missed that one.
Oh yeah,
It's gone. It's gone.
Yeah, and the one that I miss is Salvage Barbecue, right? It
Oh,
was
I
one of those
know.
places that was just a fantastic bar. It's like one of the iconic, like, what's the other one was over on Forest Ave that I'm not thinking of right now. Great Lost Bear and Salvage Barbecue are the 2 that I was like, these are the places you have to go if people are coming from out of town. It's like, this is where we're going to go, right? And the idea that place closed, and again, I think like you said, it had to do with staffing. The staffing was the issue related to the impacts of what happens when you do these like kind of minimum wage increases as part of what you're saying.
Young people can work for lower wages. I mean, you need everything from dishwashers to wait staff to accountants to tax people, right? Everybody earns a different wage, but it's based on their training, and you have the opportunity to move up, to receive training and move up. And so that's one thing that, on the left, they think, well, everybody should move up without the training. And that's a really unhealthy approach to the economy. And keep back to TIFs, they're available even to small businesses. So that's not something that just big business can go after. And I think the one thing that was always good about the TIF that's unusual is that for a period of time, the valuation in that town is frozen. You don't go up in valuation because you added a new business. And when you freeze that valuation, it means that you're not going to all of a sudden have to pay a lot more for schools because the valuation's frozen. And a lot of people don't really have a lot of information on that part of the TIF law either. And it's not perfect, but at least for a small period of time, people can rely on that, and then they're not facing ever escalating property taxes. And by the way, property taxes right now, number one problem. Yeah. And it is I don't even know how people in Portland, you think about Portland, right? So high property taxes, but they also are telling every landlord, oh, well, there's a cap on the rent. We're not going to allow you to. Give me a break. That is like one of the worst things, Chuck, that you can do, because people are going to take their rentals off the market and sell them, do something else with the property, and now you've got less housing. And here, Portland needs housing. They're doing the opposite of creating new housing by having that kind of a policy. So rent control is one of the worst policies, and it never works. You can go out and look at the case studies. You can look at the primary studies on this. It never ever works. Yet here we are in Portland. So, and I feel badly for the people of Portland. I would like to help them. I haven't given up on them. Some people are just, it's Portland. No, they're part of Maine too, and we need to support them, but we need good governance. I actually think they have a pretty good mayor in Portland.
Yeah, Mark Dion's not bad.
I think he is one of my favorite Democrats. He's a good man. And there are some good ones out there, by the way. I can name some names. I probably won't right now, but I can think of a half a dozen Democrats that really know how to lead. Well, for example, one of them right now is our state auditor. Unbelievable what he came up with, and he had the courage to do an actual audit. Good for him. And think about that. He took his job into his own hands and said, you know what? I'm going to be honest, and I'm going to give an audit to the state of Maine so that the people can see that we have no bid contracts going on in this administration. And they're not only are they no bid, but they're not reviewing the people that are providing the services. So I don't even know if they're trained in providing those services, or are we just handing out money to, is it cronyism? I mean, it's just, I hope that your stream today makes its way around the entire state, because people need to hear this. This is what our current policymakers are driving us to do, and it's not in every case. I mean, there are some cases where the left have good ideas. Don't get me wrong, and they have big hearts. I like that. But if you're telling me that everything's about a government minimum or a maximum or a cap or regulation, if you're telling me that's the way that government should work, I'm sorry, but it's not.
Well, I think the problem, like, we understand that people are coming at this from having a good heart and they want to help. Some of them are just captured Marxists who are, trying to bring about a single payer healthcare system. Like, that's what they're like, good, more people on Maine care. That's what we want, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of people that are just really thinking that this is what we've got to do to help people, right? So it does come from a place of like having a big heart and wanting to be helpful.
Yeah.
But the results, and this is where we have to make decisions as a society based on what in reality ends up helping people, right?
Yeah.
Not what in reality ends up hamstringing people. So you look at places like Portland, right? You kind of talked about with both rent control, and so Democrat policies that are harming the city of Portland are rent control, out of control spending, which is causing increase in taxes, and then the third thing is the minimum wages. So like in the state we have minimum wage, but Portland has its own minimum wage that's higher, and they're talking about increasing it further. And I think at the state level they're also talking, there's a bill supposedly that's in play, and hopefully that doesn't go through, that's talking about raising minimum wage. And all these things are causing things to get worse and worse economically in Portland, because when you have all those strengths, so like I'm a good landlord, by the way. I own rental properties and I'm a good landlord. I take care of my people. I try to have fair rentals that are not most of them at the very, I'd say none of them are actually at market. Some of them are close, but none of them are actually at market. I'm below market on a lot of mine, but I won't buy in Portland. I will not buy in Portland. Because the rent control. I don't want additional control, because this is the current level of control, and it makes it really, really difficult to be able to raise rent, even if it's rent to keep up with additional costs, because things get more expensive to own the property. It doesn't matter. They make it really restrictive. So I've said, no, I'm not interested. I don't care how good of a deal it is. I don't want to buy in Portland. And that's just me. I'm a small time guy. Think about that from a big picture. What do we have right now? We have a supply problem. We don't have enough. And we're not going to get it if people don't think that they're going to have the ability to make a profit, right? And so what happens, the supply problem continues to be harm. So because prices are so high, because we don't have enough housing. If we had more housing, the natural economy of the market would ease some of the cost of housing, right? And so that's one of the problems, is like, again, practical reality and policies that are created to, I used to, when I was running for office, I usually liked to use the phrase, I'm interested in policies that actually work, in reality, not ones that simply sound good. And that's like the idea, is like saying something like, oh, I want somebody to be able to make a living wage, sounds really great. It's like, oh, me too, right? But the problem is, what are the other consequences of that? What about the fact that, like in the business that I worked with, once you raise the minimum, the amount that you're paying your starting staff to a certain degree, now they're not motivated. Now they're not working hard, and they know that you're going to have to pay everybody else the same amount. And like people, like the motivation to work hard and do good and advance in your career, which not only does that help that person to be able to advance in their career, but it helps the company, which makes it better for everyone and for the clients and all those other different things. That motivation is diminished and it goes away, right? And so there's that problem again. So rent control creates an environment where you don't have enough housing. Price controls, again, I use the example on here quite a bit, actually, of what happened in California when they raised the minimum wage for restaurant workers, for fast food workers, to $20 an hour. And 10,000 jobs were lost in California in those types of businesses overnight, right? Like, these policies, they sound great, but we have to think about what actually works in reality. And the market is actually what works. Like, small business owners, a lot of these business owners out there, they're not bad people. They're not trying to hurt people. They're not trying to take advantage of people. They're trying to create something for themselves. Absolutely. But they're trying to do it in a way that brings value to our society and creates jobs. And these policies eliminate jobs, reduce housing, whatever the other thing we were talking about was, I can't remember anymore. But their ultimate, the kind of the welfare state, the idea of the growth of
Yeah.
the welfare state, like this actually handcuffs people in poverty, because once you get on the system, it's so difficult to get off. Like if you're on the system receiving benefits and you're making, say, $20,000 a year, you don't have to pay any taxes, you get all these benefits, right? In order to live at the same level, you have to make $50,000 a year. And if you're not receiving all these benefits from the government, right? But the problem is, like, there's a cliff in between, right? If you go to making 30,000, now you lose all those benefits. So it's almost like you're making $20,000 less, even though you're working harder and you're doing more and you're doing more good for our society. But the way that the system is structured, you just have that cliff, you fall off, and you're toast. And so all of these policies that have the appearance, or that the sound is that they're going to be good, like family medical leave, which helped to
Oh,
reduce the number of businesses in Maine. And I know that there are businesses that haven't closed as a result of that, but are really worried about the fact that what if one of my employees decides that they're going to use it, because that's not coming until next year, right? And anyway, it's just,
if you give a benefit, then people are going to use it. So you can plan on there being a really difficult time for schedulers to make sure that the work gets done, and that the work has excellence. And like what a lot of employers will do in New Hampshire is they have a different kind of a medical leave, but they have one that partially involves insurance, but gives people the opportunity to have, if they've got a family issue, to have some days off. But here in Maine, if you have a friend of a friend that has a crisis, you can take paid family medical leave and go take care of the friend of the friend. That's basic. I mean, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but not much. If you look at the law, it's really, really wide open in terms of like what would qualify you for extended leave. And it's just not easy to replace people that have, valuable skills. Whether it could be anything, it could be computer skills, it could just be hand-eye coordination, whatever it is. So we're really in for some trouble there, and employers have, they have sounded the alarm, but unfortunately, employers are fewer than people, and people don't necessarily, if they're acting rationally, they're kind of in favor of having family leave. The reason that people years ago set up a legislature is so that we would make those really hard decisions. Not everything would go to referendum because things are popular. Like we had marijuana go to referendum, and it passed eventually after several tries. Popularity isn't always the best way to go. Sometimes you got to make a tough decision because in the short run, not so good, but in the long run, we stand to benefit by a lot more. And so that's, you learn in economics, and there's a lot of economists out there, fortunately, but they'll tell you there's a difference between short run and long run. And so we need to think a little bit more about the long run as opposed to, sending a check to people, making them feel good, but then the check's gone and now we got nothing. That's basically what happened in this administration. Is they sent a lot of checks out, especially during the COVID period, and people had enough money to make a month's rent or something, or they were able to fill up their fuel tank. And I want that. But we already have programs. We have the LIHEAP program. They just call it HEAP now. We got programs already that can help people that need help. So to make up a crisis and then, like hand out money so that you can get elected in the next cycle is just horrible. But that is what we have in Maine right now, and we've got to stop that. We've got to have people that are strong enough to say, I'm going to make some tough decisions, even if I don't get reelected.
Yeah, no, and we need, in order to do that, we need some people to come over the other side. We need some Democrats to
They
wake
will.
up.
People are seeing now. They cannot believe what they're seeing. Whether it's males competing in female sports, or we go right down the line with some of these things that have just gone like overboard in Maine, and people are concerned. I do think it's kind of tough because the last time we did redistricting, the Democrats were in charge, and in my Senate, the Senate districts, I call them spaghetti districts. They're set up so that high population areas also have rural conservative towns in them, and so the Democrats did a great job of picking off a lot of conservatism by adding them to. And like I've been involved in those maps over the years, and I could see what they were doing. I was not in the legislature at the time when we did redistricting after the 2020 census. But I wish I was, because I would have just done my best to kind of rail against what we ended up with. But I still think we only need 3 more seats in the Senate, and maybe it's 5. There's a handful in the House. I think the Republicans could sweep in 26. I think we could get the governorship, and we could take the House and Senate, even if it's narrow. I think we could do it. It takes work.
It takes work, and I think one of the things that I believe is you got to have the right person at the top of the ticket, and the voters will decide that. But if we have the right person at the top of the ticket, I think that makes a huge difference. For whatever reason, it's really hard to get people to care about the state Senate and the state House candidates, and so they're going to show up to vote based on whether or not they like the people at the top of the ticket. So, Susan Collins and then whoever is the governor will be a big part of the driver as to whether or not we get the people out to vote, because kind of the effect of Trump coming over to the Republican Party is that your low propensity voters now have shifted. The working class largely have shifted from the Democrat side to the Republican side, and so it's really about making sure they get out to vote. And what's going to drive them out to vote is like having the right candidate. And so I think that's a huge part of it. And again, unfortunately, despite the efforts that we're trying to do here and keep people educated and help people understand how important school board, city council, as well as state House and state Senate, people still, generally speaking, are more focused on the national. Everybody wants to talk about Doge and Trump's tariffs and this, that, and the other thing. And I'm not saying that those things don't have value. They absolutely do. But where you have the most potential impact for your life is actually closest to home, your town or city, and then your state government. And then the federal government has an impact. Largely with monetary policy is one of the biggest ways in which they have impact.
It's tough for Mainers, Chuck, because a lot of Mainers, and this includes me and my wife, right? We work 4 jobs, not 2. We work 4 jobs. We each have 2 jobs. And for a few years, we had 5 jobs. I had 3, she had 2. When I was working at Colby, the state legislature, and my job at Thomas. So people who might want to volunteer for the local school board are really having a tough time being able to do that, because they have to put food on the table, and food prices are through the roof. So they've got to go out there and work. And it's really become to where, the people that have the most skill and the most ability to help us, maybe they just don't have the time to help us. But, I think they're coming around because they realize that if they don't help, we're going to all suffer.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's the thing, is like one of the other things that I say, especially about us conservatives, right, is we just want to be left alone. Right. But the problem is they're not going to let us. Right. And so this is what's stirring a lot of the people who would just like to be left alone. They're getting stirred up because they're like, okay, we have to do something, because we can't allow these, you talk about some of the things that are going on in the schools. I know you're in education, and like men and women's sports and some of these other things, and the economic policy, that would actually drive economic growth, which is actually better for people than, giving out free money. Again, free money only lasts as long as you get the handout, right? But then you're dependent. You're shackled. You're owned by the government. If you're taking all this government money, we want people to be free. We want an economy that's growing, that's making life better for everyone. In order to do that, we need to have the right people in office and kind of enact the right policies. So like if you had, Janet Mills' ear, and if you could get the Democrats to listen to you, what's like 1 or 2 policy things that we could do that would stimulate economic growth here in the state of Maine?
Well, the first thing that we have to do, and there's a lot in economic development that I could talk about, but the first thing we have to do is shift our focus from the welfare state to education. And,
Mm.
like, I've lived that. I had a really, really poor experience at the middle school level with both of my kids. My son made it through. He's in honors classes throughout, and he's getting a decent education because he knows where to look and he knows how to study. He's a 4.1 GPA student at Bonnie Eagle High School, and ranked number 3 in his class. I'm very proud of him. On the other hand, so he survived it. On the other hand,
4.1, you said, right? 4.1?
yeah, yeah,
I
because
thought you could only get up to a 4.
if you're in honors, they weight them high, so you get scaled up. So he's at a 4.1. But my daughter's experience was really poor at the middle school, and she's more of an arts, and she's a musician. And so we had to look for an option for her. And so at first we ended up sending her to Berwick Academy, and she had to commute over an hour just to get there and an hour back every single day. Then we ended up saying, this is great, but it's not going to work. We need to get her in an overnight school. And she got what she needed. She's out in Connecticut, but she got what she needed. Now, it's difficult for Mainers. It's difficult for me to pay for that because here's what I'm paying for. I'm paying for the tuition and my wife, but we're also paying for somebody else's kid to go to a Maine school that is underperforming. Right. And that's another part of the problem. That's why most conservatives are in favor of school choice. I'd like to bring a little bit of school, maybe gradually, but I like school choice because it adds a little bit of competition and to the schools. I don't think we should overwhelm them. I think there are ways to build systems slow and steady. But as long as they have many monopolies, some school systems are not going to perform as well as they should. And that's what we have right now. The national scores, the NAEP, right? The test that is a random sample test, but the schools around Maine and around the nation took, that showed that we were in the bottom 5 states in the United States for a lot of categories. Both math, English, science, pretty much the whole gambit. And when I was in the legislature back in the 90s, we were at the top. We were at the top. And our math scores for 4th, 8th, and 11th graders were really high. We had good science scores. We had literate kids who are ready to move on to the next grade level. So I always say, in the answer to your question, I start with education because I really believe that it's a big investment that we make here in Maine, but why would we want to spend a lot of money per pupil and get really poor results? That's not rational thinking, but that's what we're getting. So I start with that. And then some of the other economic development principles that you and I already discussed, we have to go forward with those. We got to freeze the minimum wage where it is for at least a decade and let the market start to, take hold again. We need to, I think, incentivize entrepreneurship, and that is, we've done it before, we can do it again. So all of those things, and we just need to help people get off of the welfare state. It sounds like a lot, but it's something that some of us want to do up here, and we can do.
Yeah, we just got to win in 2026. So
there
are all these rumors swirling about who's going to run for governor. I think sometimes I think I've seen your name even in the mix. And
I haven't decided yet what I'm going to run for. I could run for Senate. There'll probably be some leadership posts here. I could run for governor. I could run for anything. It takes a lot of thought. I ran in 2002, so I know the commitment that's required is unbelievable, and the shots that you're going to take are through the roof. I don't mind that. But I've been going around the state and talking to every other candidate for governor, and some that are even thinking about U.S. Senate, because there's some talk about maybe retirement there or whatever. I'm talking to everybody, and all I care about is that we have a great leader.
Yep.
If it's me, that's great. If it's somebody else, that's great. I think it could be me. I may end up running. I probably won't make that decision before the end of June or July or something like that, after the legislature closes up. It's a huge commitment. The fundraising. We do have clean elections. I've done that before. That might be for me an option. I'm not independently wealthy. I'm wealthy, but I'm not independently wealthy. And that's the thing, right? So that's an option. But there are some other people also that are looking that actually have a lot of confidence. And I'm a friend of Sean Moody's. I like Sean Moody. I think he's an excellent businessman, and he gets it. I don't know if he really wants to run again. I have talked to him. He wants to help the state. That's what he cares about. Like me, he wants to help the state. Pretty much everyone else, I sat down with Ben Midgley, the entrepreneur that started, I believe it was Planet Fitness. And, he lives down in Kennebunk. I've talked to him. I've talked to, who else have I talked? Pretty much all of them, right?
I think the names that I've heard swirling are
Garrett
like
Mason. I've talked to Garrett Mason a couple times.
Mason, Jonathan Bush, Bobby Charles.
I've talked to Bob Charles. I've met with him. I haven't talked to Jonathan Bush. I don't know. I supported the Bushes back in the day because I have a picture of George H.W. in my office. He and I really believed in his foreign policy more than anything else. I thought he was outstanding in foreign policy. Some of his domestic policy not so good, some good. You know how it is. But I tend to think that President Trump's domestic policy is pretty good. I think about all of the hollowed out towns and cities across the United States that used to be, filled with mill jobs of all types, right? And we need to bring that back. And I think the $2 trillion worth of investment and there's a list of the companies that are investing in the United States since January, the $2 trillion, that's going to turn into $4 and $6 and $8 trillion worth of investment. Investment actually takes time. That's another long run concept. Invest now, create jobs that again, those people won't be part of the welfare state. They'll be working. Innovation and training that goes along with that boosts everybody, and that is that's what I want to see for Maine and for the United States is when we say it takes a village, it takes a working village. It takes a working village. It's not. It takes a village, and government's going to take care of you. That is. We're not going anywhere if we're going down that path. So I hope I've been clear about that. We have talked about it a lot here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And one thing, just to mention, there are a couple other names that are in the potential gubernatorial. There's Robert Wessels, who's actually been running for like a year and a half, kind of a lesser known grassroots kind of guy. And then the rumors, there's a lot of people that seem to suggest and believe that Libby might throw her hat in the ring. I have not heard anything, but outside of like people, there's some people who are interested in that, but those are just two of the other names. But yeah, I mean, going back to like investment real quick, I think like that's one of the things that I think a lot of people don't really understand. This is part of the problem with this constant creep of more government costs. Because like a business that's going to make a decision to invest and start here in Maine has got to look at long-term opportunity. If they want to be successful, they've got to think long-term, especially if whatever it is that they're doing, such as building a new plant or something like that, is something that is going to take 20 to 30 years for them to be able to make back the money just from the upfront investment of building, let alone all the other challenges that may come up. And if you've got a state like Maine who's constantly increasing the cost, that's something that's challenging and something that's going to push people away. Whereas good economic policy
and also changing in midstream. So if you are calculating net present value or internal rate of return or your payback period, and all of a sudden they change the rules, then you got to throw your plan out the window and come up with a new one. And that's not what 5-year plans are for, right? Yeah, you might have an emergency and you might have to make a midstream change or something, but the state is introducing these problems and it is blowing business plans out of the water. And so, I mean, we can't afford to be doing that in Maine because Um, we're a resource-rich state, but we're also a state with some great poverty. So yeah, investment, it's a long-term, you're right. It is a long-term proposition. You have to nurture it and let it grow, just like if you're planting a garden. If you're planting corn, you gotta water it, you gotta feed it, and we need to do that with business. And honestly, we can. I'm very optimistic with the right leadership that we can do a lot of things well. And
Yeah.
I don't think that leadership is just Republican leadership. I think there are some key Democrats that really get it, that ought to be included, and we should listen. Yeah, conservative philosophy. What we've talked about today is a better philosophy, but there are people. Bill Diamond comes to mind. What a great, he's done great things for the state, and many others. You mentioned Laura Libby running. I think she would be wonderful. I do think she's a cause person, and she would be great in Congress, or a U.S. senator or something like that. She's really good with causes, and not that she couldn't be a great governor. She probably could. I think being the CEO of this very large organization takes a lot, and if she surrounded herself with the right people, she could probably do it.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like anybody that we mentioned would be better than who's currently in there, from our perspective, right? But yeah, no, I definitely think that like she's a lot of people in Maine like her for a reason. She's in Augusta speaking up for people. She's not the only one there doing that, but she is one of the people that is doing that, and
Yeah,
people see it. And she's doing one of the things that I think she does really well is her like newsletter where she's updating people, on what's going on. She's doing a good job at keeping people educated, and I think that's another thing that people really appreciate about her. But I have a lot of people on here.
yeah,
I think there's a lot of people in Augusta fighting for us, and I appreciate all of that. Not you're the maybe at this point lesser known Libby. No, I'm just,
yeah. Oh, for sure.
she's yeah. But not the only. There's more people, and so we appreciate what you're doing. And this has been a great conversation, and I think we'll probably kind of close it out and just kind of encourage people again. We got to get the right people, and that means we have to work hard. We have to volunteer. We have to give money. We have to give time.
Yeah,
And we have to I think one of the biggest things, you made a comment about Democrats, and I think like civil discourse in our country, we
yeah,
need back. Like the reality is when you've got one group of people thinking one way, only talking to each other, and another group of people thinking another way, only talking to each other, there are truths. Like here's the reality. There are truths that each side has that we don't have access to if we're not having those conversations. Like the idea of diversity of thought is actually a really good and important element of democracy, and we need it. And so that means we need to engage in those conversations. We need to work hard to build relationships. There are people more on the Democrat side than the Republican side who are going to try to cut people out of their life who disagree with them. Anybody who thinks that Trump is not the worst human in the history of the world, there are people who fall into that category, that they'll
yeah,
try to cut out of their life. But we need to try to do what we can to have those conversations, to speak truth over time. One of the issues that I think that you talked about before, I know we win on this in the long run, the transgender issue, specifically under transgender athletes, right? We know that this is an issue that in the end, when people look back 20 years, 50 years in the future, they're going to be like, what in the world were they even thinking? This is an issue where we win by continuing to have that constant dialogue with people, being compassionate, as we're doing that, but not letting that compassion overwhelm our brain, I think will help us win in the long run. So get out there, have conversations, run for school board, volunteer. These are the things that they're gonna help us win. But also take this video and the shorts that we create afterwards, like, share, subscribe, so that people know what's going on.
yeah. If you're in an echo chamber, Chuck, you can lose your hearing. You're in an echo, and boy, there's some people in an echo chamber, and they love talking to each other about what they're doing to save the world. But you know what? Those policies actually aren't doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, thank you again so much for having on. Before we go, do you
It's a
have any
pleasure.
last thing that you want to make sure that you can share, or any way that people can contact you or follow you or anything like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can definitely contact me at the legislature. So it's james.libby at legislature.gov, I believe. And I give out my telephone number to everybody. So that's 289-7413. Anyone that wants to text me can. I have a website, Senator James Libby on Facebook. And, like anybody that wants to contact me about LDs that are in the hopper now, I love to talk about them. And I get back to pretty everyone that contacts me. I get back to. Sometimes it's not instantaneous because there's so much. The volume's incredible, but I do get back to them, and I always try to have a thoughtful policy conversation with people that don't agree with me, like that. People that agree with me, yeah, but people that don't agree with me, and sometimes I learn, like anybody else.
Yep. Well, thank you so much for what you do. We're going to go ahead and close out, but stay on real quick, and we'll chat a little bit after. But so everybody, thanks for watching. And again, like, share, subscribe. Also, I'll put it back up real quick for those who are still watching. You can go and click on this the QR code there. Buy some merch. You can find it on my X page as well under my links. So thank you all. Have a great day, and we'll see you back here. I think late tomorrow night. We're going to have. Oh gosh, my brain's not working. We're gonna have somebody on tomorrow at 8, and Mainly Free is her X name. Mainly Free 76, I think. And why I can't remember her name is beyond me. We'll see you all then tomorrow. Thanks.